if you don't like. Okay, welcome to the CEFACT Global Trust Registry project, the meeting that is in Australia on November the 13th and in other parts of the world, perhaps the 12th, but I think we have Europe online, so it's probably the 13th in the morning for you guys. We will have a quick reminder for those of you who are new to the show of CEFACT projects have a kind of code of conduct, a way of working. The code of conduct is, most of the key points are on the slide that you're seeing right now, about collaboration, global input, and so on. And also anything we produce in this project is intended to be available to all as a royalty-free in perpetuity kind of license, like an open source, effectively. And that's a sort of reminder for those of us who have commercial interest and might be developing things that, you know, don't come in here with your IP and then sort of have a problem with it later. The links and the slide deck are available to you all. You can have a read of the IPR rules if you want to. I think, let's have a look. Is there any, Teresa, have you been on the call before? Just, can you speak, Teresa? Maybe not. I can't remember if Teresa's been on the call before. I was going to suggest that I think Teresa may not have introduced herself. Everybody else I can recognize. Thank you for coming. So if you want to, Teresa, you're very welcome to introduce yourself or put a little note in the chat messages, which you can on the call. Harman, immediately, hand up, go.
Just wondering, is Herman Harman, or is it somebody else here on this slide?
Oh, sorry. Well, let's fix this in real time. I was
just wondering because there's a lot of Hermans as well, but
no, it's my dyslexia or whatever. I'm not. Wasn't. There you go. Is that better? Does that make you feel better? More love.
Well, at least I know that you mean my name. Yeah.
I do mean you. Yes. So what I'm suggesting for today's agenda, since we're on the agenda now, is a quick recap of the 2 weeks ago meetings. Then there's a bunch of us that have been doing things on and around the project, and I think it'd be good just to let those that have been working on it sort of have their say. And that will probably take more than 10 minutes, but that wouldn't be a bad use of our time. And in the remaining time, we can deep dive onto some of the other topics of discussion. I was, until 2 hours ago, quite proud of what I've managed to do with the GitLab environment for UNICC and the web pages it produces. And now it seems to be throwing a little bit of a dummy, but I'm sure I'll fix that in a second. So I'll show you what that is and some of what I think we can do with the documents going forward. But I kind of want to hand over to others to raise their work they've been doing first. So if that's okay, Sankashan, do you want to go first on the kind of topic you're working on?
Yeah, I can do that. So I think one of the things that has been on my plate is to be able to put together the beginnings of what the technical operational aspects of the grid would be. And while I was very optimistic tracking on that part of it, I eventually realized it's almost like a rabbit hole and you keep losing yourself when you're trying to write that up. I ended up creating a draft that I have shared with a smaller group first before exposing this entire group to it. But there is, I believe, now a Google Doc version of my work that anyone can take a look at. Effectively, the idea was to be able to narrow down some of the questions that are open, that are still floating around as we haven't yet decided, and sort of create a nudge towards deciding on those as much as we can so that it becomes much more firm while we are thinking of how the grid would operate as well as how it would be maintained. And the nation state level integration will come about as well. That's the part of it.
Can I, Sankashan, do you mind if I drag the file over to the screen so others can see what you're talking to? Is that okay?
Yes, by all means, because I don't seem to have the Google Doc open right now.
This is the one, yeah?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
So as you can see, I mean, I had optimistically thought it would be like 5 sections and done. And then I've cracked on and ended up causing around, I don't know how many are there.
There's 14 sections.
Yeah. At some point in time, I was like, enough is enough. Let's do it for a draft before I go mad. And this is the before I go mad version.
So so thank you, firstly, and this deserves more considered response than we'll do in the meeting. But I think the first thought I had when I looked at it is we will need to provide a recommendation to CEFACT about grid, and that recommendation is I think going to be it should exist, and this document here that we're looking at right now is one of the ones that says how it might exist. In other words, what kind of sort of technology operations and architectures and so on we might be using. Now, I think there are choices, obviously, in that decision. There are ways we could build this or run this, and we might want to give the idea of these choices. So Joe and I were talking a little earlier today about fully decentralized models, federated, centralized models, and so on. I'm thinking about EK or PKD. So I noticed that here we've got this assertion about using a distributed trust ledger, and I think we can certainly that's one of the ways forward. It may not be the first way, it may be the first way, but I kind of feel like these are like choices.
Oh, absolutely. I'll highlight some things that I had to write because we had to get those assumptions discussed. The ledger is one part. There is a very cutely explaining smart contracts, but not actually mentioning them by name part of it somewhere. The automated trust policies or something. Took me half a day to come up with something that I can use in place of smart contracts. So I think when you mention choice, this is specifically what I'm trying to get us to think about is the language, the terms that we use that would allow us to make recommendations that are not locking in anybody who's implementing it to a particular way of doing things.
Okay.
And I'll be the first to state that this draft is not meeting that kind of neutrality anyway, but it has to have a neutral tone to it.
So I know many of us have got the day jobs to do, and I'm just thinking that people like Joe, that I think is still on the call, I think you're still on the call, Joe, are going to be very keen to have a look at this. And others I would encourage that have a architectural technology bent, have a look at it too. It's in the project deliverables folder, which you should all have access to, and it's the file called Grid Technology Operations Draft. So let's help Sankashan sort of work on it and get something that provides that opportunity of considered options and ways of showing it's entirely possible, and here's a number of ways in which you might do this, and some of them obviously going to have benefits over others. Anything else, Sankashan, about this that you want to draw our attention to?
Not at this moment. I think what I'll probably do is wait until our next meeting for feedback that comes into this document, and then we'll create a plan in terms of how to make this much more, make some progress on this. This has been floating around, these things have been floating around for a while. Harman, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, I haven't been able to go through the doc yet, but in Europe, we're kind of using this concept of lists of trusted lists within EIDAS, where every country kind of maintains their own trust lists and kind of explaining who's allowed to do particular stuff, mainly related to these qualified trust service providers. I was just wondering, have you guys been looking at it already or considering that? Because I can imagine that conceptually, and maybe not in a technical way exactly how Europe is doing it, but it very much feels like what we have been describing over here.
Absolutely. There's there are patterns that exist that we need to sort of be aware of, exist and are emerging. Europe has obviously several, even things like the ISO 18013 kind of lists that they use for VICAL and RICAL, whatever they're called, Joe, those sort of lists about trusted authorities to issue and to retrieve or use driving licenses data. Yes, we need to refer to those. That's part of this project has those three parts to it around understand what exists, explore and sort of consider how we might use that, and then make the recommendations. So there's sort of three steps. So yeah, we keep having to be aware of what's happening so that we can refer to it in a sensible way. But I think I'll put the bonus back on you, Harman. Give us the links to the area that we need to pay attention to then. If you know, I agree with you. There are significant activities in Europe that need to be paid attention to. Let's share them in the project group.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a little bit also kind of contribution we could have. Also, the meeting we had last week, with the Chamber of Commerce in Holland, and we actually are also doing an experiment now where we are also looking at those concepts of lists, of trusted lists, and then separate trust lists. So I think that's one of those things where we could also, share some experience and knowledge on that in the upcoming weeks.
Absolutely. And thanks. Joe, you put your hand up.
Yeah, no, this is good. Look, I certainly welcome the contribution from Sankshan. As always, is very well thought through. I mean, the challenge here is one of both the maintenance of the grid and then the distribution and utilization of the grid information. Now, that might mean that you use different mechanisms, different architectures for those which can be quite distinctly different. So the distribution might use where it's appropriate, and to be honest with you, where a UNTP extension demands that it has to work in a certain way or has a certain technology, then you can leverage that sort of technology in that approach. The maintenance of the grid is actually the responsibility of the organization that maintains and operates the grid. And they don't need to be necessarily segregated or separate. Confused or combined. So in essence, I'd like to probably segregate those sort of considerations so that as we start to maintain the access to the grid by the registrars and the registry participants, we can actually sort of let that do its own work, and then the distribution of that information and how it works in practice can work in multiple different ways.
I guess, and the thing I'm thinking is, as both of you are kind of sharing what is evidently necessary for us to think about, we can only think about so much before we have to have a thing to publish, right? Yeah. So we've got to be very cautious, as I think Sankshan was saying, about going down rabbit holes. Even if we know that rabbit hole needs to be explored at a point in time, we kind of, all we have to prove is this thing is possible. It's doable now with technology that exists. It's not cutting edge. The thing that's really interesting about it is the social, political, economic kind of benefit of having it. And the technology thing is, of course, it exists.
And technology, as we know, evolves, and
it's going to change.
It's going to change whatever it is we decide to do first.
Yeah.
So the important thing is, the technology has got to be appropriate for the use of the information, and that's the challenge that grid has to be neutral about.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Alina, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hello, John. I think I hope that the echo is gone.
Sounds it.
Yes, I'm now using the headphones.
That's huge news, Alina. That's been there for months. So if you've got rid of the echo, I think we're all very happy.
Yes, so I've got the solution in my hands, I think.
Good. You were working, just to give you a hint about where I was thinking you might want to go. You were sharing with me a few weeks ago ideas about how we might add more information into various documents and handle various sort of content and merge things and so on. Sankshan's been thinking about the same topics. Do you mind sort of sharing with the group kind of I know your areas were the DIA legal significance, digital identity anchor, and its legal significance, and some other parts. Do you mind sharing kind of what your thinking is there?
Regarding merging the documents, yes, if you can show us a little bit the structure of the draft again, once again, so that everybody sees it.
Yeah. I will. I have something that I was preparing earlier. Here's something I prepared earlier. I'm updating the explainer, and I have here we go. I have this diagram. So we've got this idea that we had at the beginning of come on screen. There we go. So of slideshow of how we might think about these documents that we're producing. So this is in slightly.
Yes, for the moment, this is the structure of the document. On Tuesday, we were talking about merging documents 1 and 4. Since we have got the document 1 regarding eligibility requirements set to be met by the registers, and then we have got the document 4 regarding the governance operating procedures that have to be by the UN CEFACT system. And I think we have already seen the document in a previous meeting, document 4, the 4th document. And we were also talking about the digital identity anchor legal requirements that would be interesting to merge this document with the, where is, I don't see the other. Yes, document number 3, recommendation on data structure and schemas for digital identity anchor. Okay, since we said that the digital identity anchor has to meet on one hand technical requirements, which is the document number 3, but on the other hand, as well, legal requirements. I don't know if everybody here has seen the document. The section regarding the legal requirements that the digital identity anchor has to meet, or if you
Here it
if
comes.
you have the document, yes.
So it's this document here. So what Alina has been doing is thinking about what is the meaning of issuing a DIA by a registrar. What's the legal meaning of that?
From my perspective, of course, as a jurist, I think that the legal requirements are highly important of the digital identity anchor. And the other day I sent you, I don't know if in these documents we have got as well the updates I was sending you.
Let me have a look to see when the last changes
I think
were
I
made.
sent you some some changes.
I've only got up to the 30th of September, so I might not have got those. I think you sent those to me during October.
Let me see if I can find it somewhere.
While you're looking for that, I'm going to go back to that image again. I like the idea of merging the 1s and the 4 because I like kind of hopefully a simpler life. But what I want to suggest actually is that things like there are 2 buckets of work that we're providing. One is this recommendation about the grid, and the other I'm seeing as the recommendations about digital identity anchors. And that I like. Therefore, I like what you're suggesting, Alina, that that number 3 is augmented with legal implications of digital identity anchors. We make that a kind of more robust part of the documentation, and we have a sort of separate body of work around the grid and what the grid is.
Actually, I'm not now just having a look at the legal nature and scope, like the legal requirements of the DI. I think that one of the most important is the number 2, of course, regarding the issuing entity, that it must be a competent public authority designated by statutory or regulatory mandate to change such records. I think these requirements, these documents should be merged with document number 3. And of course, there are others such as competent authority and issuance conditions, minimum content and life cycle management. And I will just have a look because I send you a couple of updates, important from my point of view.
I'm just trying to find the file again to share it, but what we could do, Alina, is I looked at those when you sent them to me, and I'm happy to include them. I don't think there's any reason. I can't think of a reason why I, not a lawyer, would refuse to accept the updates that a lawyer is suggesting to the legal requirements. So I think they should go in, and we then produce this. I think this merged idea is the right way to to put it. In fact, we didn't have a placeholder really for the legal requirements for digital identity anchor. But this one we can reword the title of this document and actually include the technical.
I just found it. I was referring to technological neutrality and open standards, and I was adding that implementation of the digital identity anchor shall remain technologically neutral, which I think everybody agrees on this, ensuring interoperability across multiple infrastructures and platforms. No single proprietary technology, vendor solution, or distribute ledger system shall be required as a condition for validity, verification, or interoperability. And then I added that the DEI standard shall adhere to open, internationally recognized technical specifications such as W3C, verifiable credential, ISO, blah. And yes, I added as well that enhanced data minimization and privacy safeguards. This principle of data minimization shall apply not only to the content of the DI, but also to any process of issuance, verification, or exchange involving it. The DI shall contain only those attributes strictly required for legal identification and validation, and shall exclude non-essential data such as secondary identifiers, contact details, or transactional metadata.
Can I slow you down for a second, Alina, on that one? That's a
Yes.
really interesting area of thinking, and I remember slowing down when I was reading it. So I'm sure we all just heard it, right? Where I was understanding Alina was going was the idea of the principle of data minimization. Which has a sort of alignment with ideas like GDPR and other sorts of issues around privacy, maintenance, and so on, risk and data breaches. What I'm interested in about that is there's a couple of things. One is the actual design that we have received, I suppose, from UNTP of the digital identity anchor does have secondary information added to it, albeit information that the recipient, the applicant, asks the registrar to add to their digital identity anchor. So they ask the registrar to add in these DIDs to the registration that they receive as a digital identity anchor. And the other thing I guess that I'm kind of keen to revisit is our initial work, I think, is going to be about organization identifiers when we're talking about that type of identifier, not people identifiers. So we're not going to include, in the first instance at least, things like the names of the company officers, unless we have to. And here I'm very interested. I'm vexed because we've said separately we don't want to impose upon the registrar the way they work. That's up to them. So how do you see that sort of balance happening, Alina? If the registrars want to do that, is that still their choice? What's your read about that?
I think we should set minimum rules, but of course, if as we said several times, that the implementation pilots have to be decided by the member states according to their national legal frames. But of course, a set of minimum requirements we would have to include in the draft, in my opinion. Yeah. And I was also referring to privacy preserving methods. Yes, excuse me.
We have people with hands up now. I think numbering. Harman, you're first on the list.
Yeah, actually, I was just referring back to. I really like the slide that's on here now. Kind of, it's a nice summary. But what I was wondering, the document that Sankashar was working on seemed also. It's not on it. Is that?
Yeah. So what we're realizing is that the names of these documents and the kind of content that the name implies, even the bullet point list, is insufficient. Really, that's why we're kind of working out. Well, I actually want to put my hand up and say I think governance is becoming, or could become, governance, operation, technology, revenue, a whole bundle of things describe how might the grid work. And that would include potentially the way it might be built, which is where Sankashan has been working. So you're right, it isn't on this list. It needs to be on this list somehow, either by renaming for or whatever. I want to share something with you quickly that is sort of been front of my mind while I've been working on the
John, that we're going to go back to the organizational identity that you alluded to.
Yes. Okay.
Later on. Okay.
If you want to, yeah, absolutely. Your hand's up anyway, Hans. Is that what your hand was?
Yeah,
up
but
for?
continue on what you wanted to show now. I
Okay.
can remember what I wanted to ask, and I will.
Well, that's good that one of us is remembering something, because I want to bring forward. So where I was going to with this, and I can't now find the. Let me go to escape. Okay, here we go. So this is forgetting that failing pipeline thing. This is the repository that I'm now building out of GitLab's environment, and its structure is somewhat similar to the one we have in the Google Drive. Okay, the documents are numbered at the moment kind of a similar way. But what I've realized is that in a separate email to me, Sankashan was proposing ways of considering merging and amalgamating and using the documents, and had two different sort of ways through, if you like, these documents. We know we're going to have different readers of content. It strikes me that having atomic blocks of sensible content about a topic that we can include in various different ways, like if it was a Unix, a make file or whatever, like considering that we can create a set of content for a registrar, you would read documents 1, 5, 7, and 10, say, or something. You'd have a sort of way of saying the registrar would read these things, an architect might read these things, but you have a separation of these topics in different files because they're all useful. So where I'm going to with that is that while I displayed on here, a kind of vision of a kind of documents of only a few and trying to get to fewer, actually, it might be that it's a good idea to it might be that it's a good idea to have many documents of smaller structure so that we can combine them in different ways. So then Sankashan's document stays standalone as its title is about technology and architectures and so on, and we can use it then in more than one place. Does that make sense? That's where I want. That's my diversion.
Yeah, I think as long as such docs at least are part of the overview, because yeah.
So that's where what I have done quite a bit of work on is this sort of about the project kind of content and putting the explainer in and a few other things. So
just one thing, John. So in the case we merge these documents, we would probably have to rename the sections as well.
Good point. So yes, there needs to be a bit of thinking about how to make each document effectively kind of like a standalone, but collectible into kind of a container that has more than one of them in it. Now we can do that as a web presentation of the documents that are available to us. We can kind of add the bits together, if you like, and then you get a kind of coherent view. But you're right. We need to think about things like numbering and about naming and stuff, so that we don't get a mess when we pull the documents together. But my basic principle is having more single documents isn't a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, but anyways, at the end of the day, the draft will still have to be divided in different sections. So
yeah. Yes, exactly. So ultimately, there will be a coherent, sensible, simple document that's presented to UN plenary, the UN CEFACT, to say these are our recommendations, supported by a whole bunch of other documents, right? That either will be included as attachments or be referenced and available and so on. But the first piece they read needs to be simple and coherent to read.
Yeah, I think Hans was trying to tell us something since quite a while.
Yes, back to Hans. I think he wants to talk about business organization identifiers.
Yeah, you remember quite well. Exactly. John, the question that I believe you posed to Alina was if this project should be recommending to authoritative registrants to also process personal data as they do as they do currently already, because I have a little GmbH, which is a limited company, and I'm registered as the managing director for it with all my personal data. And having that information usable for whatever purpose would be really, so in a digital way, would be really helpful.
Okay, helpful. I didn't know whether you were going to say helpful or horrific. I didn't know which way you were going to go to. But okay, helpful, good.
It can be horrific. It can be helpful.
I think. So that's where my thinking is. We've said at the very early phase of this project, we cannot legally or with any authority dictate to registrars what they do. They do what they do under their own laws, and all we're doing.
I use the word recommend. I'm not going to use
recommendations. Now there's also two levels of things happening here. They currently register people like your company, Hans, and they do whatever they do, and they capture whatever information, and they have whatever processes they follow. We're talking about an and. So having done all that, we're saying, and you could release a digital identity anchor, a verifiable digital identity anchor, or even digital identifier anchor, because I actually prefer that phrase. I know either Hans or Harman suggested it should be an identifier. They can release one of those. Now, that's almost like another thing you can do rather than changing what you currently do. So it's sort of.
My question is around the ambition level of the project. What is the ambition level or the functionality of the DIA, of the digital identity anchor? Is it going into the direction of organizational identity, or will it just?
So think of it. We have an ambition that is achingly great or ambitious, right? But it's actually not that hard, which is a bizarre thing to say. The first ambition I have is this thing called GRID. All that is a directory of registrars, of authoritative registrars around the world. And that could be as simple as a sort of a text list or something. It doesn't need to be automated, machine readable, blah, blah, blah. It's an authoritative list of things. It will be so much more powerful if it's got verification of other things as well. But the first step is just the authoritative list. Those next steps, like making this GRID itself machine readable and maybe even issuing credentials to the registrars to say you're recognized by the GRID, here's a credential. There's all sorts of wonderful things you can do from that. Then you're talking about, like, I imagine, like a tree structure. The next thing is each registrar might itself issue a digital identity anchor. That's the end game UNTP wants to play, the United Nations Transparency Protocol. They want a world where supply chains are enabled by verifiable credentials that provide all sorts of benefits to the participants. And yes, that is the end game, but we in this project can achieve a great outcome with even just the first bit of doing the GRID, and then build from there. Because what we also all know, our registrars are at very different levels of maturity and capability in terms of digitalization, the monies they have available, their appetite, all sorts of stuff, right? So you can't imagine that everybody's going to at once go, yeah, let's do this, and in 12 months time the whole world has done something. It's not going to happen. So we have to accept that the first step delivers value without any change necessarily on any part of the registrar. They just document what they do and we make it accessible, and the next thing is recommend how they might move forward with a digital identity anchor, which is where Alina's work on, say, the legal meaning.
I see Hans' point, because from the point of view of our organization, we were concerned as well about data privacy, especially because when we disclosure information, to be honest, we don't do it for free. We charge a fee to disclosure information, and we're not willing to give data or grant access to data for free, which is obvious. So that's why I was suggesting when I send you the edits to the digital identity anchor legal requirements, to add something regarding data privacy, such as I was saying, the DIA framework should implement privacy-preserving cryptographic methods such as selective disclosure and zero-knowledge proofs, enabling verifiers to confirm authenticity without revealing unnecessary personal or, as Hans was saying, corporate information, because we do not want to grant access for free to corporate or company information, which is obvious.
So that's a very good point, Alina. But I guess those are 2 points, right? There's a point about commercial sensitivity, which might be the registrar's commercial sensitivity, not just the commercial organizations that it registers. It's its own business unit, its own capability. And then there's also another layer about privacy and about selective disclosure and zero knowledge proofs and so on. Those are both important. But for me, we can say the principles. We make recommendations and say the principles of how we think. We cannot say you must, because we have no authority to tell them you must.
No, we could say we should in any case.
Yeah. So when we write a principle like the principle of data minimization should be followed, right? Okay. Fine. It's up to the registrar to decide how much, or if anything, they're willing to put into, if they're willing to do a digital identity anchor at all. So it's sort of
data minimization is a result of architecture, of clever architecture, I believe, also.
Yes, yeah. It's not just a legislative thing; it's a technical decision or an approach. So yeah, so to answer lots of questions sort of in your question, yes, we are very ambitious, but actually the ambition sounds very minimal to start with, but it's like a wedge. You know, it starts, gets wider. Cool. All right, let's move back to the schedule. So that was Alina. Mark Lazar has been doing some stuff that I think he'll only be on the call tomorrow morning my time. So we'll find out from Mark. He was talking about some of the work he's been doing in things like consents and stuff. So we'll see what that is tomorrow. You've already had a few comments, Harman, in the mix. Is there anything you want to sort of say to the group about kind of what you're doing next?
Well, I think in general, maybe just telling to others that were not in the call on Tuesday. I mean, we've been doing a range of pilots and experiments that very much kind of, I think, do conceptually what we're trying to do here. So for instance, digital identity anchors issued by the Dutch Chamber of Commerce as verifiable credentials, then also having an identity registry kind of based on the AEDT. So my suggestion is actually I could do a demo of this stuff to kind of show it, right? So explain how the Dutch Chamber of Commerce is issuing a digital identity anchor credential to companies, how those companies can then use it, how they can expose it, etc. So if
I'd like that.
For that, I can do that next time.
If that's okay with the others, I think that would be great to see. Let's spend a few minutes looking at Alex.
Hey, like Harman, I also have an approach that I would love to present either in the next meeting or the subsequent meeting. I think we've built something which uses digital identity anchors already. We just didn't call them as such, and uses that tree-like structure that could be applicable to the grid. So, and we now have a UI, so it's not conceptual. It's very easy to sort of visualize. So would love to showcase that at some point.
That would be great. I quick question to you both, and then I'm going to go back to Hans because he was actually on the list before Mark. Is 20 minutes enough, or is 30 minutes enough? What's a minimal viable time frame that will be sensible for you to sort of run through a demo and explain what it's about?
Maybe from my perspective, I think maybe if we have these sessions, right, on a bi-weekly basis, maybe if there would be, I don't know, 20 minutes, for instance, every meeting to show something within the community about something, either Alex, for instance, or me, or anyone else that actually share something, what's happening in this space to really get feedback on. I think, I mean, you can always spend hours on this. I think that wouldn't fit, right? So my reason for showing it is just sharing it a bit. And if somebody likes it a lot or is interested, we can have follow-up meetings, more one-on-one or whatever. If people hate it, they can also mention it. I think the whole point is sharing. And I think it's so vague and abstract in general for most people that we have to show concrete things, which make it easier to figure out if we talk about the same things.
So I'm sick, people's thumbs going up. So yes, let's do that. Just one observation: we've only got a few weeks to go till Christmas. So let's get in those two, yourself and Alex, before because that's 4 weeks, right? So if we do it in 2 weeks' time with, say, you were first, Harman, and then 2 weeks' time, if it works for you, Alex, then that'll be in December.
And by the way, for instance, Alex already, I mean, I think Alex and me were in some kind of chat or Slack channels where I think I'm really interested also to see the stuff from Alex. I think it's also about, right? So I really like that we kind of get together now and get to use these moments to actually share those kind of things. So from my perspective, that would be really useful.
Cool. Well, let's do that. Hans, sorry, back up to you because you were in the list and I didn't have you in. I didn't say in the right order. Can I hold you for 1 second because we had a hand up before I got to you. Gondolier.
Yeah, actually, I have one question. I'm not sure about it, but actually, whenever we are defining the register, we issue the identity. So, are we also considering the many-to-many mapping, like many register are issuing the different kind of ID kind of thing?
So if I understand the question correctly, are we considering a kind of many-to-many identifier kind of mapping process? So what we have so far is the idea that registrars have a authority need to register something or things, that they have a kind of a legal responsibility to do some sort of registration. They have already a defined process, and they already have a defined method of writing an identifier down. So what we're looking for is a way of representing that in a what we call a digital identity anchor, such that could be used by a supply chain participant to prove how they have been registered by the authoritative registrar. So if there are many identifiers that the registrar knows of that one organization, yes, they could produce a multi identifier DIA that's entirely possible, or they could produce many DIAs. And either way could work, and you could selectively disclose part of the identifiers if you chose. So does that answer your question, Gondolier?
Oh yeah, kind of.
Kind of. Well, follow it up on Slack or an email or something if it's.
Yeah, sure. I'll drop you one mail as well. Like.
Oh, thank you.
For better understanding.
Hans, finally.
Well, thanks, John. I haven't had too much time the last fortnight to run through the documentation as I wanted to, because I was totally consumed with other things and specifying use cases for another project. However, I'd like to catch up, and I'm wondering how to start around the DR itself. And Alina just answered a question that I had around the life cycle of a DIA. I have to look into that. I think I went through that document, and then exactly I came up with that question, if there is a life cycle. But I'm going to look into it again, Alina, and see if it makes sense to me.
And the life cycle you're thinking of there, Hans, is that sort of creation, replication, update, delete, all that kind of life cycle. Okay, cool.
Yes, yeah. From creation of the DIA to its death.
I think there is, let me just have a look at the document, something about this life cycle. Nevertheless, we are happy if you would like to suggest any comments or anything that we could add to the document, obviously.
Yes, of course. I will have to go through it when I find time, and I'll comment on it, and you can then read the comments and derive your insights from them. What I also want to do is run through all files and check for things like technology neutrality, for instance. As you may know, I'm active in a endeavor that is not looking at the W3C bit web model, but at another, and I'd like to see that whatever is specified here is technology neutral. So we from Verifiable Trade could as well be one of the first implementations, or become one of the first implementations of the UNTP. That's something that I find very, very important here in contributing to this project.
That'll be.
I think I just found the paragraph you were asking about. It's named minimum content and lifecycle management. It's the paragraph X3. When you have time, you can have a look at it and let us know how you see it.
Thanks, Alina.
That'll be fabulous, right? Getting an implementation of UNTP. The thing, are you already sitting in on the UNTP sessions as well, Hans, or is this your main interaction? So there are already implementations of UNTP. There already have been, and if you saw this week, G7 and the Responsible Business Alliance announced their commitment and their pilots of UNTP. So there are already solutions that have been built and are being used. But you're absolutely right. I have a personal, I share the same ambition that, as Joe said before he had to leave, the technology is always going to keep shifting, right? And I'd suggest that the use of verifiable trades, sort of the whole of the ACDC carry stack and so on, is a far more sophisticated approach than using DID web and the other technologies. And it's got lots to hear that. Lots of positives, yes. But lots of positives. But it's also more complicated. But that sometimes comes with the territory. But I do think that complicated. I do think the principles. I do think that the principles. Show me the key ceremony, mate. Anyway, that's another conversation. Where I'm going to is yes, right? Yes, the technology should be the specification should be as technology neutral as possible. The thing we're working on, this grid, can be initially in its first instance disarmingly simple, right? Where it gets interesting is where it specifies the digital identity anchor. What we intend to do, to a question Sankashan gave earlier in the discussions, is feed back our insights into the UNTP specification. So if we find that there's a gap, an omission, or a way to write it in a way that makes it technology neutral and interoperable and so on, then we propose that into the UNTP spec, and hopefully they accept them pull requests and it's updated. Sounds reasonable. Harman.
Yeah, just one comment on it, because in general, I completely agree. And I think the people that know FIDES community is all about kind of open and neutral digital trust. But at the same time, I think I do want to share also that one of the main things is you can say things like, yeah, we want it to be technology neutral, which sounds great. But if you want to be interoperable, you have to make choices, right? So I think we just have to be aware that choices somehow have to be made. And that's a conflicting thing sometimes. So yeah. I think that's where we have to find a balance, right? Because I think we more or less agree, but if we want to achieve something, and if we want to really bring something to the world with this, there have to be choices.
Yeah. And I know that when Alex does his demonstration, talks about it, he has some answers to this, some of the ideas around interoperability and other things as well. So you're both right. In fact, all three of you. Alex is quiet at the moment, but you're all three right.
Let me add to Harman. You have to make good choices.
So we collectively have the good choices, right? I mean, as long as we can make the choice, right?
Yeah. So in the spirit of the harmony that we seem to be experiencing, the idea that we have with this sort of presentation is it's a logical model of something, not the physical or the actual architectural model, right? So we can write documents that sort of talk about the principles, the logic, and so on. But when you get down to the how do you make it, how do you implement it, Harman's right. Of course, you make choices. You at this moment in time, we build it with these technologies, and later we might build it with those technologies. And there's a whole world of how do we migrate old to new and all sorts of stuff to face us. But that's sort of the bulk of what I want us to write. To 2/3 is going to be hopefully neutral, and the 1/3 that talks about specific technologies will be as open as it can be. In other words, non-proprietary technologies and so on. Both of which I think you're suggesting. I think all of Hans's verifiable trade stuff is open source, available to others to build as well. As I think yours are too, Harman, and I think Alex's is. So
Yeah. And we don't have anything specific. I think Fetus is about making clear what exists, right? So ACDC and Carry fit perfectly in that, right? So let's not get. I think what we just said is, for instance, something like DID web is something possible, but I think nobody probably over here actually feels DID web is the way to go on the longer run at all, right? So I think. Yeah.
One of the small moves I got UNTP to make recently was to abstract out of the documents any reference to DID web to replace with just DID method, and then to put into one place and one place only a discussion about the DID methods, so that it didn't have that whole sort of flavor throughout that makes it difficult to update and maintain and so on. So they've now got that. They've got a kind of DID method section, and everything else. They've discussed DID methods in one section, and every other reference is just a DID method, and so on. But they likewise have to make recommendations about which DID methods should be supported. They went from DID web to DID web verifiable history.
VH.
Yeah. I think that's a big improvement already, but again, maybe not the end game. That what Hans would probably say, but still, it's a very important next step.
Excuse me, John. Could you please give me a brief explanation, since I'm
there are two.
Why is it more convenient to?
No, I can do it. I think I can do it quickly. I'm always an optimist. There are two kind of fundamental standards that the current UNTP spec leans on. One is the W3C verifiable credential data model, and the other is a decentralized identifier standard, DID method. Okay, so the DID standard describes a general structure for these decentralized identifiers, and it has the DID, the letters DID, colon, and then a method, and then colon, then a kind of an address. And that's a standard sort of structure. There are hundreds of DID methods. So people have written a way to write a decentralized identifier onto blockchains, onto the interplanetary file system, onto wherever, onto websites with DID web. So there's lots of these methods, and one of them is DID carry, for example. There's a bunch of methods for DID. So what we suggested, and Alex, it wasn't me that made the changes. I just raised the issue. What we suggested to them is they could abstract in the UNTP spec out of writing DID web everywhere and just write DID method and say, look, the methods can be looked up here that are supported by UNTP.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, I think Marcos suggested that as well.
Possibly. He asked a question about DID web.
Yes.
He certainly did ask a question. I don't want to enter the DID wars. So I just want to abstract it to DID method and let the conversation go to somewhere else. Okay, I usually promise to finish these. So what I've been doing, and I'd appreciate anybody that can. I'll go back to my slide deck. Is a quick updates on work in progress. We've been discussing the file renaming and file merging and file stuff. That's going to be ongoing, I think. But I will put in the changes you proposed, Alina, into the legal spec doc for DIAs, and then we'll pull that DIA spec into the legal spec into the same one that talks about the schemas and so on. And we'll do the same merge you've proposed around the eligibility requirements into the document number 4 at the moment. So we'll do those changes in the next 2 weeks. I previously have shared things about pilots. That's also available, by the way, on this site here. Oh, right, let's go to here. So pilots has its own little sort of discussion on our little web page about what we might expect a pilot to include and how it might work and so on. And back to here. Sankishan shared his thoughts as an update. I guess I'll leave it open, Sankishan, at the moment as an action, but you're working on that. I know. I want to say that the documents on this site, which are sourced from a markdown format, are the master copies. Now, the way I propose that works is that we still work actively on our Google Docs and do commentary and whatever else and sort of work in the sort of a dynamic space that gives us. When we feel reasonably comfortable that it's mature enough, we migrate it over to the markdown space. Ideally, if those of you who feel comfortable doing this, log into or get an account on the UNICC space, which is this link at the bottom of this slide here. And then you'll be able to do the normal things about raising issues and merge requests and all the other things you can do within a GitLab environment. So that's my kind of call to those who can. Please get yourself a UNICC login. Sankshan, I know, has got one. Joe's got one. I don't think they have the same hurdles to jump over that becoming a CEFACT expert has, interestingly. So sideball. So that's my request. Is then once we've got enough people, if we do get enough people active in the GitLab space, then of course we can start being kind of proper around how we're managing the content in here and raising issues and discussing the sort of merge requests and so on. But at the moment, still work on the Google Docs because they're easier for people to access and easier for people to raise comments on. And I'll just do the manual shift, if you like, of content into Markdown for GitLab. And that was all I had for today, I think. I've run out of slides. So thank you, everybody. That's quite a good active discussion. Is there any last questions? Anything else we need to cover off before we call it a day?
Hi, John. This is Monica from. I received your email in October regarding project Vishwas. You shared a document prepared using Gemini, right? So that was a wonderful document. We discussed it internally, and we are also looking for various other use cases than this KYC process for loan applications. We are looking for other use cases. So just wanted to confirm, have you received confirmations from any other countries also for the pilot programs? And is there any GTR team which is helping countries for these pilots? Are there any technical service providers or what? How you are taking up the pilot programs with other countries?
First question first. Yes, other countries doing pilots. Alina and Spain are very active on the pilots and already have a team working on how they want to do it, and they'll be very, very keen to discuss it. Harman is bringing the Dutch with him. That's a very crude way to say it, Harman, but he's looking at getting KVK, the Dutch business registrar, to participate in the pilot, possibly. There was a discussion earlier this week on that, and we'll see how that goes. But in principle, there's certainly interest, and there's potentially capability. It depends on a resource and so on. That's whether they can do it. Canada is another country that's active and keen. They have had, unfortunately, 8 weeks of what's called work action, but it's like not work action. There's been strikes in Canada, in the British Columbian province, in amongst the staff that have been working in this area. But they're now, I believe, back. And Brianna reached out to me this week to say they're keen to talk about the pilots again. Their pilot is likely to be on critical raw minerals or critical minerals because they have a sort of mining interest that they've been pursuing for a while. So our hope is that we could combine all these in some meaningful way. To your technology question, Sankashan asked, what kind of frameworks do we have for people to work in and with? Well, we have kind of, if I'm very blunt, we have nothing, but we have many things we could do, but we don't have any, there's no kind of computing resource that's been made available to us to work with here. When we think about interaction with the grid, the global registrar information directory, we can either, words, mock that up. In other words, imagine that it's there and discuss what would be requested of it, what it would respond with, how it might work, and then use that to refine the design. So it's like a paper-based design exercise about how the grid would work. We could prototype it using existing technologies, even something as simple as forms and online sheets of data and other things. We could do something with that. We can even use existing directory type resources, things that manage directories, and use one of those. But none of those will be necessarily representative of the final design, because we're not building the grid until we get approval to build the grid, and that won't happen until sort of at least July of 2026. But we can work with any pilot to see how might we help that pilot make sense of what they want to do and connect to another pilot and try and sort of make something happen that's impressive.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So can you brief me a little how, when you say our GTR team is aligned with Spain to help out on the project, on the pilot project, so what kind of assistance the country receives from the GTR team? Maybe 2 or 3 examples. What kind of assistance we receive?
I guess I don't know what kind of the assistance I think that can be shared is really progress on what you're doing and how we're doing it, and maybe they can share data sets that are accessible and not commercially sensitive. So the kind of dummy sets of data and other things. I don't think I know that Spain already have set up Alina, you should speak to your own pilot here, but you've got a budget, you've got a team.
Yes, actually, we have a team working on this, that they have just started to work on this pilot, which is actually the same team working on the We Build initiative, the package regarding businesses that Spain is co-leading. So we think that both initiatives should align, or at least from our internal point of view, be harmonized. That's why it's actually the same team working on both initiatives. I don't know exactly what was the question. That
the question was about what resources might be available for pilots.
Actually, we have our own tech department within the Corporation of Land and Business Registers. We have a huge tech department, and as human resources or material resources, we have our own working on these pilots. As I said, that they have to align from our internal point of view with the European initiatives such as We Build.
Alina, there's a company in Spain that I know about has a lot of trouble with all sorts of different identifiers around their customs proceedings. It's a large marketer of textiles.
Is that a business promotion thing, or I don't know what that was?
No, it's just knowledge of all the corporations that I was part of. So it may be worthwhile addressing them if we look for pilots.
Yes. So if I'm scrolling around this page just to show some sort of content, but the idea we had about who might be involved in a pilot would be some representative of an authoritative registrar. So we've already got 2 of those on the call already. Some idea about who the supply chain participant might be. And there are many more than supplier and buyer. There's all sorts of customs officers and other things you might introduce into it.
That's exactly what I was alluding to, the supply chain participants. I mean,
yes,
it's
you get one of the exactly. Good idea.
The textile business is incredibly global and causes a lot of devastation.
And there is already a textiles extension for UNTP. There's a UNT.
Yeah.
So that's sort of
for good reason.
Yeah, exactly.
But if the question was regarding the budget, unfortunately, we will have to use our own budget for this project.
Yeah. So our back to the question about budget and resources. My going in expectation is pilots are self-sustaining. This project has no money. We're all doing the work on this pro bono.
Yeah.
These pilots will have to decide themselves how they might fund themselves. But what I do think we can do is create the environment for you to share your ideas and what you're doing. So it could be a really good idea if the Indian team are ready to have a discussion with the Spanish team, right? And see if there's a way to work together on some topic that makes sense together, and or add in the Canadian team.
Of course. We are open to these ideas. Yes, why not?
Yeah.
Well, maybe there are initiatives already underway that look for funding to run some pilots, and you could just piggyback on.
So yes, they're looking for funding. Or they have funding.
If you look hard enough, you find funding.
So the answer to the question about pilots is yes, we really do need to kind of encourage these to happen. So the encouragement we can give is to connect the pilots together about what they want to do, and to help them, the pilots, to facilitate the discussion around how might a sensible pilot be run and what might it do. So I'm very happy. I'm sure Alina's going to be busy with the pilot for Spain anyway, but we're very happy to help the pilots work that out, and ideally even connect more than one together. We get 2 or 3 together and make some sort of global initiative.
Sounds reasonable.
Is that okay?
As I mentioned, we had for the moment everything, or the pilot project also, a little bit on standby due to political decisions that we are having now elections for a new board of management. So it was all a little bit on standby, unfortunately.
But it's got a green light now, or is that still on hold at the moment, Alina?
No. It has green light. The pilot project is approved, but the development or the work in progress on it was a bit on standby. That was just.
Okay. I do want to call quits because I always try to promise people we'll finish before the top of the hour, and I failed miserably. My apologies for that, but it's been a great discussion. And I think there's probably a lot more to say still. So please, I encourage you to use the Slack channels, use our group email, reach out directly to myself or Alina, and let's keep the momentum going. It is only a few weeks till Christmas, if that's important to you, but it's a few weeks at the end of the year, which might be important as well. So not long to go before we should have something to recommend in some draft form to the UNCFACT Bureau. So the clock is ticking. Okay. Thank you all very much. I'm going to hang on for a bit so I copy the chat messages, because I do think they evaporate when I stop. So feel free to leave. I'll stop talking and wish you all very well, and I'll see you on the next call.
Have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.
And you.
All right, thank you.
Get out of here.
John, do you want to stop the recording if you?